Good evening. It is 7:01 on Tuesday, February 18th, 2020, and I call to order this regular meeting of the Richfield School Board. In attendance this evening are board members Paula Cole, Peter Tensing, Allegra Smishek, Christine Malik, and I am Crystal Brackey. Board member Tim Paulus is unable to attend this evening's meeting, and we are joined at the table by Superintendent Unowski and our student board members Diane Maceo and Lucy Luna. This evening, we strive to remain focused on Richfield Public Schools' mission statement that we inspire and empower each individual to learn, grow, and excel as we conduct our meeting this evening. There are printed copies of the agenda on that table in the back and also available on our website, and we are so excited to have all of you here with us tonight. The first item of business this evening is to approve the agenda before us. Is anyone prepared to move the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Cole and a second by Mr. Tensing. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the agenda is approved. We move next into the information and proposals non-action items section of the agenda, which this evening begins with time for public comment. We did not have anyone sign up to address the board this evening, so just wanted to note that the next opportunity to do so will be at our board meeting on Monday, March 16th. So we move next into the superintendent update section of the agenda. So I will turn things over to Superintendent Unowski to introduce our presentation this evening, which we have all really been looking forward to and are so excited to have some of our team from Richfield High School with us this evening.
All right, so one of the exciting things that we have the opportunity to do with a senior project in our College in the Schools class with Mr. Harris is hear some of the presentations and proposals of students to our district and to our school board about how we can improve and how we can serve our students more effectively. So I'm going to ask Mr. Harris to step on up to the podium and the microphone so he can introduce the project that is done in senior social studies and talk a little bit about what is happening in social studies, and then our students are going to come and join us and talk a little bit about their suggestions for how we do our business more effectively. Is this yours?
Very tiny.
All right. So this is a program that we started maybe 5 years ago, a project, and we do it with all the seniors social studies classes, and it's designed to give our students voice in the school and what's happening. We've been lucky. We've had board members, Steve, Dr. Roby, I believe Craig has sat in on some of these presentations throughout. And what we're trying to do is give kids an opportunity to identify problems and solve problems. We want to make sure it's student-centered. It's empowering for the students. Some of their proposals that they've put forward then have come into fruition, or just even put the concerns out there. It continues to build and get better every year. I remember the first year, it was a lot about school lunches and keeping bathrooms clean and stuff that we knew we needed to get better at, but definitely weren't transformational. This year, at the end, we'll go over a list of the different things we have presented and some of the stuff we've done. We work a lot on 21st century skills, just communicating your message, working with others and workflow. And this project gives kids an opportunity and then just establishes trust, because I feel they feel valued by having people come in. And then every one of our guests, Craig and Dr. Roby and Steve and board members, answer questions. Sometimes it's tough and Christina's been in, it's tough to hear some of the things students say and criticize. And sometimes it's tough for the students to hear that some of the things they're asking for aren't possible. So what we do for this, we kind of put it into 4 buckets. That's how we've learned. Before it was kind of wide open. And we ask kids to look at either student engagement and proficiency, how we can increase our graduation rate and achievement gap, college readiness and academic skills, critical thinking, so how can we get that better, and then our school culture, pride, equity, things like that. So students first try to think about all of those 4 buckets and identify problems, like a list of about 20 different problems in small groups. That's usually a fun day. We try to get them to think about what what it would look like if we were the greatest school in America. And even if we were, we would still have problems to work on. Then they try to narrow that down and whittle it down. And then through our GT program at the younger levels that a lot of kids went through is a program called Future Problem Solving. And they create kind of a matrix. So you select your problem, and then you create potential solutions for that problem. So they come up with 4 or 5 things to solve it. They really narrow it down, and then they create criteria in order to kind of score it, which then the scoring gives them their best solution. And once they have their solution, they create kind of an action plan. The simplified thing that I use is my son there. That was a cute picture. When he was in preschool. He just turned 8. We actually just had his birthday party, but in September in Dayani, remember, I get the whole class thinking it's his birthday party and we're planning his birthday party. So we come up with the problem, what to serve. Criteria for how we're going to make the choice is always first before you come up with solutions. So you're not kind of cherry picking what your criteria would be. So for this, it's like the cost, the prep time, what Lou likes, cleanup, and then what other kids would like. And then the group brainstorms different things we can serve. So like hot dogs, pizza, spaghetti, tacos, or I make really good fried fish. So we come up with that, and then it's each of those get a number. So whichever one is the cheapest would get a 5. The second cheapest would get a 4. Third, a 3, a 2, a 1. And you do that for all of the criteria and all of the solutions, and then you choose whatever that number is. And so this one, then it's pizza was the winner. So then you create the action plan. I'll order pizza 3 hours before the kids come, and then just teaching kids how to solve problems that way is also it takes the kind of politics out of it. You're kind of debating each criteria, and you might have different disagreements on where it falls. But then once you get your answer, you had your say on each of those individual parts, and so then they come up with an action plan. So that's kind of the project, and then Vashti is here to share kind of her presentation, and then Junior and Luke are here to share theirs. So, you ready, Vashti? I don't know. Can you pull that off? You did show. It's all you.
Sorry, I kind of have a cold.
It's okay.
So our topic was college readiness, and my name is Vashti. These are the other 4 people that helped me make this presentation, but they couldn't be here today, so thank you. So I just included their names. So our first topic is AP versus CIS classes. So those are the 2 things that we offer that are kind of like college level classes in the school. But I feel like one of them is better than the other. So first, with AP classes, you won't always get the college credit you signed up for because the class is very rigorous, and instead of like being like better for you to learn, it's kind of more like cramming all the information inside your head to end up like taking the test. And then even if you get a 3 out of the 5 scale that it is, sometimes colleges don't accept that. And so I just feel like it's not really the greatest way. It's still a good option for many students, but you also have to pay for it, and a lot of students don't even get the credit. And then for the other one is CIS classes. This one is you're guaranteed college credit if you pass, and with a C. And the credits are more accepted and transferable because they're from the University of Minnesota, so they're like really, accepted at any other college in Minnesota. And I feel like the classes are better and taught and better structured. It's just like they have more real world problems intertwined with them. So like, for example, in Mr. Harris's class, it was CIS political science the first semester, and that was the time where like all the impeachment stuff was going on. So while we were learning about all these kind of terms, we were allowed to, see that in the real world as well and incorporate that into our lessons, which I really liked. And it gives students college experience and makes them more prepared for the future. The next one is workload and class structure. I honestly feel like CAS classes are easier than the regular classes because I was a student that took regular classes in 9th grade and 10th grade, and they were really like harder and a lot more busy work, if I have to say, and they just didn't really work well. Like, it was meant to help the students that were struggling, but it just caused it to be even harder. I feel like the best way to teach students is by using real world problems and not always giving like a lot of work. And like, for example, we tried to like learn how to write an essay, so they tried to teach us like, oh, first you need to use like your analysis and like, this and that. Like, the way they structured the lesson wasn't very good, because sometimes the best essays, you don't write it in the order that they teach you to. Sometimes you write the conclusion first, or sometimes you write the your first body paragraph first. And I just feel like the honors classes that I had, they were able to convey that better, and they were able to give opportunities to kids that learn differently. And then the next thing is Mr. Harris taught us about this thing called incentives. Junior really likes that word. And it's basically like the reason to do things, right? So when they introduced the AB classes, it kind of added more work to my schedule because I was taking this mythology class, and that was just like taking up more time than it was supposed to. It was supposed to be kind of fun, but then like in order for me to get a good grade in that class, I had to put more work and also pay attention to like my other regular classes. But then the study halls that we have are too loose. Kids are just like on their phone all the time, so I feel like there needs to be a balance. I also think that we should have more ACT prep kind of classes. I'm a member of College Possible, and it helps students prepare for college, and they teach them like how to apply and like what you need to do. And I'm a first generation college student, and without that program, I wouldn't have been able to apply this year. So I'm very grateful for it, and I feel like a lot of other students deserve that kind of opportunity. However, I know that those programs, they only accept like a certain amount of students, but I feel like if we have more AB classes that teach ACT prep or college things like that, it would be really well. And I also feel like we should teach students at a younger grade, like instead of waiting until 12th grade when they've already lost the opportunity to grow and to like make their things stronger, their applications stronger. So we should tell them about these things from freshman year and like, have them make a plan. But I also think college isn't for everyone, that it shouldn't be forced upon you. Like, kids feel like leftovers if they feel like, I'm not gonna go to college when I graduate. So I feel like we should make it okay to tell them about trades or like going to a 2-year school, making that more, acceptable, because they can still succeed in life without pursuing a higher education, but it's still good to talk about it and stuff. And then I'm in student government as well, and we were talking about pride and how to build school pride, and Miss Daniels said that we aren't honoring students enough, and that we should have like more like breakfasts for stuff like for kids that are doing well. But then when I was in 9th grade and I got on the honor roll, someone told me that they didn't tell me this, but I heard them say it, that the honor roll is so stupid because it honors students that always achieve good, but they don't honor students that go from an F to a C. And I feel like that's really important. We should honor growth as well. And like kids, as I said before, they feel like leftovers. Like there's always the kids that are at the top, and then no one cares about the kids that are at the bottom. But if you give them hope and motivation, they'll be able to, feel proud about what they're doing. And so if you give kids opportunities, they can succeed if you show them that. And then for the importance of middle school readiness, I think students are lacking skills needed for college because they aren't being taught skills needed for high school. this has been become a terrible cycle of catch up. It decreases motivation and hope. Skills that the RMS curriculum should be strengthening are writing, reading, critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity. I think that the middle school keeps students in molds, like they show them an example of something, like how you can do this, and then all the kids kind of follow the example because they want a good grade, but it doesn't really give opportunity for students to be creative or like to show their learning in a different way. And then I use this as an example. I didn't learn how to write a proper essay until I had Miss Holly for 10th grade. Like in middle school, I felt like I never learned grammar, like where to put my commas or things like that. And now that I'm in high school, all I do is write essays. I write essays for everything. So I wish I didn't have to learn how to write an essay while I was like, in high school. I wish I would have learned how to do those things when I was in middle school. And I feel like the middle school curriculum is very boring and it disengages students. So, how to strengthen high school readiness? We should stop scaring students into feeling unprepared for high school. All students should be in an environment where they feel cared for. And with this, I feel like there aren't enough school counselors. The ones that we have, they're not able to remember everything a student says. So I feel like when students go to them for help, they feel like it doesn't make any sense, so they don't go. And then every student is important, not just the ones that have A's. And grades should reflect learning. Learning lessons should be interesting and contain real-world problems. And we should introduce high school skills that will build into college skills. So thank you for your time. Do you have any questions or comments?
Actually, thank you, and thank you for representing the rest of your team so well too. Yes, absolutely.
So I'm really interested, Vashti, in what you were talking about, comparing your experience in the regular class and the honors class, and it sounded like your experience in the regular class was that just the way it was structured with kind of the focus on what felt like busy work, even though that might not have been rigorous, it still was harder for you to sort of, am I interpreting correctly that what made it hard was that you just couldn't kind of emotionally get excited about it? Is that kind of where and then you were able to get more excited when the rigor of the course was raised up a level?
I think that it is that it's kind of boring. Like they feel like kids that are just regular need more help, but like more paperwork or more homework doesn't necessarily get students like the better education, And in my honors classes, I feel like the teachers are able to tell when a student is struggling and they're able to help them better, not necessarily with more paperwork, but just showing them how to do it. I feel like if a lot of kids that were in the regular classes came into honors classes, they would be able to achieve better. It's just the way that it's being taught. I'm not able to explain it that very well, but I don't really have that many examples for it. But just like for English class for me is the one that I kind of remember the most. I just feel like they didn't really give the examples or the things that students actually needed. They said oh, these kids are doing bad in essays. Let's teach them how to write an essay. Let's make them take notes on how to write an essay. That's not how you learn how to write an essay, You have to learn how to critical think about what you're reading and how can you fight for that in your essay, or how can you defend it, and things like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Vashti, I'm blown away. I love your ideas. I'm so impressed. And I'm also impressed by how you really empathize with all kinds of students, not just students like you. So thank you. And I'm curious, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you think of any other classes that you have had that kind of real world problem experience other than Mr. Harris's class that you felt really inspired to learn?
For me, it was 11th and 12th grade that those classes were the ones I felt that were the best structured. And so both of my history classes or my social studies classes were great, and my English classes were great because they connected together. So we would learn about a period in history, and then in English class, like we would read about things from that period, and then we'd have discussions about it with classes. And I'm not really good at public speaking, but
You're doing great.
but like through those classes, I was able to gain more confidence, like just speaking to other students and being able to share like my experience and then connect it with the other experiences that I was learning about. So I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you taking the time to come here and share that with us. I'm sure it isn't easy to stand up there and tell us some of the things that are being done wrong, but it is really important for us to be hearing that. So we really appreciate the fact that you came and shared that with us. Thank you.
Danny and Lucy, is there anything that you want to say or questions that you would like to ask of one of your classmates? You're good. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you have the chance.
I think you did a really good job. I think you focused on the right things because, we're all going through the same thing as you are. So, yeah, I just think it's cool that you came up here and did it in front of a lot of people, which I know is nerve-wracking.
Very much so.
Actually, I would like to say that I appreciate the fact that you included kids that are like underrated or like just not talked about, like kids, like you said, that go from an F to a Z instead of an A honor roll. Because typically, like kids that are on the A honor roll have been on the A honor roll since 6th grade and have been like appreciated and honored. But like you said, like the kids who aren't haven't been appreciated. So I really think that was a cool thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really well timed that we're hearing from you and the others who are going to speak in a few moments, because we are in the process of deciding what do we really want to focus on for the next 5 years as a district. And I feel like some of the things that I'm hearing from you and your group, but I heard from the classes that I was able to attend in the fall, are thinking differently about how we do counseling at the high school, thinking about how we honor students for a broader range of accomplishments and really celebrate successes that students are having in our schools, and also really focusing on what is the content of the courses that students are having and the experiences that they're having in classes, and focusing on how to have more of the experiences that you've had in 11th and now 12th grade in middle school and earlier in high school. So those are some of the really big things that I'm taking away from what you've shared with us. So thank you. Anything else? Okay,
Thank you.
great job, thank you.
So I'm going to step up and help Luke and Junior get ready real quick. You guys also presenting?
I think we accidentally.
Yeah, I think we shared it to someone.
Yeah, shared it.
Yeah,
Oh, I got it. I touched it.
Oh, you got it?
I got lucky because your name's on the first slide.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. I'm Junior Akbet LLC,
I'm Lugat.
and those are our other, what's it called, group mates that helped us come up with this presentation.
So, kind of why we chose this was most of us are doing a lot of extracurricular activities. I'm very musically and arts focused, where Junior has been focused a lot with sports and track. We all have pride in what we do, but and we bring up all our performances, but we want to figure out how to improve more people like entering a lot of these sports and activities, and what will boost confidence and the morale of the players. So that's kind of why we chose this, because we feel like our culture and our morale is not where it should be as a school district or as a high school.
All right, our specific problem was that most of the school doesn't really participate or show up to our extracurricular activities. And the brand of Richfield is subpar. And we feel like now with our whole rebranding and everything, that we should include like rebranding our sports. Like, let's get people to the games, get people to the plays and stuff like that.
So, a lot of the things that we think were potential solutions were sports are not scheduled at the same time on the same days. Because a lot of the times we like have basketball and like swimming maybe on the same day, and a lot of it we know is due to our sections scheduling that, but finding ways to kind of get more advertising to those it also will help because we feel like we have games, but we have a big game today for basketball, Holy Angels versus Richfield, but it was not really announced at the school or advertised saying, hey, we have a really big doubleheader with Holy Angels and Richfield today. And we're kind of talking about getting more announcements and broadcasting of games and current events on a bulletin board would help get people more interested into our sports and our game. A lot of the things like our dances, we pay money to go to dances, but we feel like a lot of the money that goes to dances just does only for a DJ, but we don't see getting refreshments. Fire Nights was like the first dance we've had a while that offered any refreshments from DECA. So kind of adding more refreshments at the dance would be helpful. I remember when the middle school, they've done like food, like pizza and that stuff at some of their dances beforehand for like the same price as the ticket. And incentives at the games like raffles or t-shirts have like free food raffles, like the concession thing would kind of bring people coming in and also improve our brand. We've gone to the hockey games before and they do like a puck drop thing like at halftime. Something like that is not super expensive and brings the fans to the games because it's something that they can participate in.
And this was our criteria. We had scheduling, advertising, food, incentives, and brand on the y-axis, and then cost, availability, planning, ease of participation, general enjoyment, and scoring on the x-axis. And after we, scored everything, the one that seemed the most viable was advertising, which scored the highest at 19. And for that, we feel like we could do something with, like you guys know how we have those big flat screens in the lunchrooms that don't really show anything but just like a scrolling feed. We could make, it's like slideshows of ads that we could just put on there, or game schedules, play times. We could just put valuable information that students should know about our extracurricular activities on those TVs instead of just letting them play through.
So a lot of challenges with our advertising. About 2 years ago, but late last year, we got rid of announcements over our loudspeakers at the 10th hour of the day and switched over to email. Now, some 10th hours and some teachers decide to do our announcements, but some do not. And us high schoolers, even though we are trying to improve, we are not the best at checking our emails. And so reading the emails for upcoming events isn't really the best way to get the message out. And like advertising by school isn't really creative or engaging. One thing that I've noticed, I'm a TA at 10th hour currently for Ms. Johnson's class, and what she's done to make announcements more engagement is she has each student come up and do an announcement a different day, and then they can like have a couple minutes to like ask the student questions and get to know them. So it kind of also brings like a classroom team building in, but that's just one classroom, and not other classrooms do that. And so kind of getting rid of those announcements of loudspeakers kind of felt was like a step back for getting the word out.
Before I talk about our action plan, my math teacher, Mr. Zolmer, today was just talking to me about how before they used to have like these funny little skits on the TVs that they had in the classrooms, where they had like a news crew where they like make like weekly news. And he was telling me about how like even till to like this day that he still remembers some of like the little skits because it was like, you know, funny and informative at the same time. But yeah, with our action plan, we can bring back the announcements over the loudspeakers, more athlete-run events, more ads, exposure for sporting events, which would be like the TVs in the lunchroom, get coaches to notify the school about how well athletes are doing. Like our basketball team is ranked 8th in the state, and no one knows that but like people who are friends with the basketball players. Set up highly active social media pages. Yesterday, I was on Instagram and I saw that like the Jefferson student government people, they have like an Instagram page where a whole bunch of their students follow, so then they can just post like, oh, school spirit days on their Instagram where most of the kids are already on the app. So they'll see it more, they have a higher chance of seeing it on Instagram than they do of just walking through the halls and reading a poster. And put up a bulletin board, which we could do like, for that, I was thinking like something in the main entrance, like when we first walk in through door 5, something that could be there for us to like just look at first thing in the morning.
So overall, even though Richfield is overall trying to improve, we are more lacking our school culture and feel like with our solutions we can improve this area where we're lacking in. And a lot of these things seem small, but it's very important to have in a school with all these, because we have a growing community and we're growing our brand, and so putting like ads on TV when we don't have lunches and like menus are showing is nice to see during passing time. Our solutions for our school help improve with the sports, grades, and testing, and it all starts here because when students are more engaged in their school and show more school pride, studies show that they pretend to do better in our schools because they're more excited and more thrilled to be a part of a Richfield or any school community. Any questions?
Thank you. I'm sure there are going to be questions and comments. Yes. Who wants to go first?
Really? Okay. I mean, I guess all I have to say is ditto. I mean, almost every idea that you guys brought up, I'm just really, really glad to hear you say it. And you guys should know that there are a number of adults in the organization who feel the same way and would love to see a lot of these changes implemented. And yeah, I mean, I guess I would take it myself as a take home to say, yeah, that number one action item, advertising, that seems very doable and something that we could very easily just kind of tick that box off. So, I mean, yeah, ditto.
And another question that I was telling other people about this, and everyone like asked like how and or who would run the ads, and I volunteered that student government could, like we could just make the slideshows at the start of like, we could make them on Sunday, Monday morning, throughout the whole week. They're all like, we'll have all the ads running and everything. So student government could also handle the ads.
Yeah, I just love the idea of, I mean, first of all, Junior, when you walked in with your student government shirt, I kind of felt nice little pride welling up inside of me. So the fact that you're representing, you actually bring pride to everybody else just by representing that way. So thank you for that. And I just love the idea that student government would step up and take it. So it's great.
I think both of you, the teams, did an excellent job. And during presentations, I was able to visit 2 different classrooms, and the level of everyone's been very thoughtful and very unique. Like when I went to school that day, I thought I was gonna hear about usual things that other kids your age are thinking about, and I was blown away by you know the topics that came up, because that's really showing what high schoolers are really thinking about. Like I don't remember when I was in high school, and this is really unique too. My colleagues here know I'm learning along about all this passion for sports in high school, because it's not what existed when I went to high school in another country. But I really want to commend all of you and your teachers for giving you these skills that you're going to keep applying to different subjects as well.
For me, I appreciate that it's sports, but it's also activities and arts. Knowing that our band has won multiple awards and that we have visual arts shows with students winning awards. Often when we talk about school pride, sports, which is very important about our school pride, is the only thing that's talked about. So for me, I appreciate that your team came together to look at some of the larger picture of all the things we do to build school pride.
I think you guys had a really great presentation and you guys had really good ideas on like how to implement these things. But with that being said, I do think that most of these issues are like student based, and like we as students can take initiative and like basically get students to go to games and like just find a way for them to care more, because at the end of the day, like you can make like ads, but that doesn't mean that everyone's gonna show up to sporting events. Like for example, like swimming, our swimming team's like really good, but people didn't even notice until like we started going, well, some people started going to like the swim meets. And I think with that, like the way that high school works is like kids go with their friend group. So it's like if my friend group's not going to the game, I'm not gonna go. Like I don't want to walk in alone. So I think we need to come up with a way for like students all together, whether it be seniors, juniors, everyone, to just like come together and just genuinely care about what's going on.
I can see what you're saying, but I also, there's a lot of points of, there's still confusion on where the message get across. I hear a lot of times, hey, is there a game today? Or, okay, yeah, there's a game today, but where's it being held? Is it here or is it over at like Holy Angels tonight? Like, we need to get better at that information, because I agree, it's ultimately up to the student at the end if they go or not, but making sure that information is more widely available so then there's less questioning and people figure out, oh, last minute, wait, there was a game, that better planning and that stuff so people can plan better can also help improve attendance.
I really appreciated that you included the criteria chart, because I was like, oh, that's how you would, like, I felt like I was going through the process with you and could see why you chose advertising. And I just thought it was so interesting when you were talking about incentives and you talked about the puck drop. It was like, oh yeah, because then you'd get to be part of the action. And I think your idea about social media is a great way, like anybody can engage on Instagram because they're already there through hashtags or sharing things or liking things. So I think that's a really great idea to get people interacting with the events that you're having. So very creative.
Yes, I think they were all really good ideas. I think our extracurricular advisory, we have an extracurricular advisory group. I think this would be really good information for them to have. And I don't know if you guys would be willing to go and talk to them, or I think a student voice on that group could be very valuable.
Yes.
So that's currently a group of parents and other community members who I would say are trying to think about a lot of these same things that you all are talking about. And so I think, like Christine just said, the direct student voice in that is probably missing, even though I think they're trying to solve and think through a lot of the same challenges that you are.
I don't think they would have thought of the Instagram.
Yeah. No, I mean,
you guys know how to get the word out to other kids, and that is what we need.
So true.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
Get a student on there or several.
And I did know about the Battle of the Tracks game tonight, so some people knew.
Yeah. I think you're highlighting that it's an interesting issue.
Yeah.
One part of it is, what are we doing within the high school to give you all, the students, the information and the systems that you need to know what's happening, to get people excited, to turn out to different events. And then I think there's the second part, which is what are we also doing at the community level so that our broader community, whether it's other schools, but also people who live in Richfield and have been cheering for our teams and our extracurriculars for decades, want to support the schools as well. And I think we need to be thinking along both lines.
For that, we didn't really mention it in our presentation, but we're thinking of, like, you know how now they're installing cameras in our gyms? Maybe we could put those to use and use them in a way of live streaming sports on our page. Like, we could have a Richfield High School sports page where we'd live stream like the volleyball games, basketball games, and then community members that can attend but still want to watch from the comfort of their own homes.
And one of the strategic advisory meetings, somebody recommended a Richfield YouTube channel where you could have students talk about things, like you guys could give your presentations and they could be on the YouTube channel, but if you could put the games on there too, that would be really cool.
Yeah, like live streaming, basically it says you need a computer with stable internet connection to do a Facebook live stream even.
So, and this is one of those awkward times where I can say, we have done Facebook Live and we do have our own YouTube channel, so clearly we need to. As we begin that, those are clearly things that we need to do a more effective job. I will admit, we have just gotten those rolling and gotten those more public, but we're just beginning with some of that work. And so those are exciting things for you all to be calling out, because those are things that we are definitely trying to improve on.
Yeah, I feel like one of the consistent themes across presentations in the fall and here tonight is how are we making connections across things that are already happening, but that oftentimes our students don't actually know about or are not experiencing. And at the same time, what are we hearing directly from you all that is not working or that you need more of? I think it's just all about that connections and communication, and I think doing it more often and being able to be more nimble in how we respond to what our student experience actually is. Any other comments or questions? Thanks so much to both of you for being here.
Yeah, and just to add on that, a lot of it was, and what Mr. Zelmer was talking, we had TV broadcast news once a week. And then with that, and I would never want these back, we had the big fat butt TVs in the front of the room. And the class that ran them then ran the scroll. So there were sporting events, like all of this stuff was there for kids all the time. Even the announcements that are emailed out, we're not doing that. And then just as a coach, as a head coach for boys soccer, please don't put that back on the coaches. It's because I think it needs to be kind of everything at once that we're communicating out. And in the past, I've done that, and it's a lot of work just coaching the team and organizing those boys. So I think somehow but we do have to. I don't think anybody ever knows we have a home soccer game, and it gets frustrating. And the only way to do it is to tell everybody, and it's like, well, how many people can you tell? So Vashti was it. These two groups, I invited these two groups to it out to everybody else. I appreciate them coming out. Vashti had a great presentation about just the things that she's felt and noticed that we need to fix and do better, and that's why I asked her to come. And then I really believe Junior and Luke's group had something that is just a no-brainer that I'm sure we're all thinking about, but then it really tells us what we need to do. So this is the list of kind of the different presentations, and I invite you to take a look at it. Some of the big common themes, though, were in the college selection. As a CIS teacher, very proud this year we had 87 high school seniors take CIS political science. So that means, that's not half, but it's 40% of our senior class taking a college class that I feel like if you pass that and do that, the kids that do, when I speak to them outside of school, they're going to make it. And they're doing, so we have, for sure of that 87, 74 got a grade and had a performance that I know are going on to college. And our counselors are overwhelmed with a lot of work that I think it's time that we've built that program to where we need to focus on helping the kids with selecting a college, because we've built that up, and I'm very proud of that. Our social studies class next year, department next year, because of the presentations, created a course. We'll find out on registrations if we got enough to run it, but it'll be an ACT prep theme in the fall, and then a college selection theme in the spring for juniors of next year. This year it's usually it's an interesting time for seniors because it's fall of their senior year and they're kind of thinking, oh boy, what did I haven't done anything to get ready for college. And that's when we're running these presentations. But I ran a lot of the stuff by the counselors, and I know we're working on a lot of the things they talked about, and then we're on year 3 of our AB schedule, I believe 3. And just taking a look at seminars, I think our seminar courses, some are creating more work for kids and others are creating more time to work for kids. And I think it's time to, from hearing the presentations, one of my big takeaways was maybe it's time to at least ask the students what they want from it and what we want to do from it and what the path is, because they've been successful, but we have to make sure we're getting the right kids in there and that kids want to take the seminar classes for the courses that they need extra help for. Would be a good one. And I don't know, you guys have the list in front of you. I don't feel like I should read it to you. If you'd like to look at it, let me know if you have any questions about any of the other topics. But we do work pretty hard at trying to get you, so there's 6 presentations per class, 7 classes, and then I kind of narrowed it down to, there's a variety, to speak to Paula's point.
And I think you chose, like you said, a really good range tonight to come to the board meeting. So thank you for that. And the one other thing that I just thought of, because you talked about the preparation and how to just expand even more the number of students that are having access to the types of courses that you're talking about. And I saw one of our former student board members at the fire and ice ceremony 2 weeks ago. And so he's in his first year of college and talked about how he's in such a different place than his classmates because of the courses that he took here and the credits that he had going in and his confidence that he had going in. So it was just wonderful to hear somebody who was in his first year out of high school talking about that very specific thing.
I generally hear freshman year of college is easier than what I mean, if they're in 4 CIS classes and then taking mythology or whatever, I feel like they end up they're over prepared. It's really we're doing that's a really great program with CIS. I did just meet with one of the counselors on Friday, and we've reached out to the U to see how we can get some better data on promoting how many. I mean, we have kids with 30 some credits or more, and a lot of and trying to see if we can get some numbers to how many kids are in 10 or more credits. Because if you've succeeded in 2 of these classes, you're college ready. You're going to make it if that's the path you choose. So it's pretty cool. And we should have it was just at Park High School that had like their IB logo on the front of the school, and we should have something with like a CIS school, because I believe we're top course offerings, and we continue to expand. We added a teacher prep course next year if we get enough kids to sign up. We added a CIS climate study class this year, so it just continues to grow, and when those opportunities are there, we jump on. Any other questions?
I just have one thing to say. I know that like CIS classes get too full. I don't know how exactly it's like measured, but that should definitely be something that's like looked at, because like I've had friends myself who like I've convinced to take like CIS classes like for their own good, and they haven't been able to join because either they lack requirements, whatever those are, or there's no room, which is kind of like.
Yeah, I could. So each cohort. So I teach in economics and political science, and the professors. The econ professors at the U set the parameters for the econ courses that we offer. The political science set their parameters for the courses. So the 2 different worlds are like political science is Tim Johnson, and his group is academic freedom, and the teachers know how to do it best and do what you want to do. And then in econ, it's more professors concerned that the students won't come in with that with the knowledge they need, so they're a little tighter on how many kids you can have in the class and what the requirements are, and they're not really up to us to decide. We can bend a little, but really they set those parameters depending on each one. So that's kind of, econ went to a 28 cap. It used to be 35. This year they moved it to 28. I have to live with it, so it's kind of how it goes, to answer your question. Anything else? All right, well, it's a fun project. Next year, maybe we'll try to, we did these in October, so maybe we'll try to pick 2 or 3 of the best and come back in October, because I think it's valuable. It keeps getting better. We presented at Reimagine Minnesota, a group last year, and I believe Blade High School picked up the program and is trying and doing a similar deal, and so it's kind of cool.
I think this is great. I would love to see, when you come back, us to provide you with some changes that were made based on
There you go.
presentations and the
That's
things
right
that
on.
these kids have brought forward.
Mhm.
Because I think, and getting that information back to the kids that did the presentation, I think would be really valuable. I think they need to realize when they're making a difference like that.
I remember telling Junior, who might have just like, yeah, here's your chance to make a change. You put this together. I said, this is how you, and then he showed up, and so it's great.
It's going to get that Instagram going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do it go.
Definitely. He's like a
Yeah,
tech
let's get
person,
those advertisements rolling on the TVs in the lunchroom, right?
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Mr. Harris, and thanks
Thank
to the
you.
students.
Vashti and Luke, thanks in particular for spending part of your Tuesday night with us. We really appreciate it. Is there anything else in your section?
That
of
is the
agenda?
superintendent's report. I thought because it was our students presenting that we would just focus on that for the evening. And so now we'll get down to other types of business.
Sounds great. The next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda containing routine business items. As always, if there is an item that someone would like to remove for independent consideration, that could be requested at this time. Otherwise, we could have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I move to pass the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Smishak and a second by Ms. Malik. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the consent agenda is approved. We move into old business, where we have several items before us this evening, the first of which is a fourth read of Board Policy 546.
Right, fourth and possibly last, but we will see. Policy 546, use of peace officers and crisis teams to remove students with IEPs from school grounds. As a reminder, and we give this reminder with this particular policy, this is an MSB required policy. Some of the policies are mandated policies by the state, and some of them are optional based on the needs of a school district. This is required, and this is about the appropriate use of peace officers and or crisis teams to remove, if necessary, a student with an IEP from school grounds. We have gone through the old version, the red line version, and the MSBA model policy. The main change that has occurred since the previous read is on the page 4, bottom of page 4 and beginning of page 5. And this was suggested by Mr. Paulus in relation to parental notification and coordination. If possible prior to the removal, reasonable attempts shall be made to contact parents or guardians, continuing to the end with the removal. The full edition is, if the parent guardian can be reached and is available, the student will be remanded to the custody of the parent or guardian. If a parent or guardian cannot be reached prior to the removal, the student will be remanded to the custody of the school resource or police officer involved. And so one of the questions we had as a board is, we're in these horrible situations should they occur, which is extremely rare, escorting students from the school grounds, but it doesn't say where they are ending up. And so we wanted to clarify that and align that to our other policies in regard to how we coordinate with police and how we coordinate with parents. So with that, I will open things up for questions.
I just had one thing on section 3C at the bottom, where it says the school district will offer training to the police liaison officer in order to promote an improved understanding. I feel like we should maybe have something a little stronger than offer. Like, I guess we can't require, but provide or encourage or something maybe just a little stronger than offer.
Right, and Director Malik and I had this conversation before. So offer is a little softer than we actually do. We do provide training to our police liaison officers. So provide would be the appropriate word, and while we cannot require them to participate in the training, we can also expect that as a board policy, and with our partnership with the police, if we provide that training. Even if we actually offer it, they do it, but I think provide is a much clearer, we will train our police officers and make sure that that is provided. And so if we do move this forward, we would suggest the friendly amendment of changing that word from offer to provide, because we will train our police officers to make sure that they are aligned to our school board policies.
And so that's the distinction that I wanted to make, because we do, I know, provide training when people are in that role, but making sure that there's also, as part of that, specific to this policy.
Specific to this policy.
Okay.
So we train in the implementation of this policy as one of the multiple policies that we train in.
Okay.
So with our police officers, we orient them to the district when we partner. We walk through the police contract, and then we walk through the pertinent policies. 977 and 546 are the two main ones. And so those are the ones that talk about our cooperation with law enforcement, and this one talks about police officers in this regard. And then we make sure that we are engaging in that dialogue about the role of the school resource officer within our schools in relation to how that might be different from their role on the street or somewhere else.
Thank you. Any other questions or friendly amendments? I'm certainly comfortable with that language change, offer to provide in the policy.
I will move the policy as amended.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Tensing and a second by Ms. Malik. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the revisions as amended this evening are approved. Next up are two change orders related to asbestos abatement work.
Thank you. The first of those is a change order for Richfield High School for asbestos abatement, change number 4. It's a change for $79,515.01, increasing the total cost of this up to $787,959. If you just remember, there is a larger net change previous to this because we moved some of the work from next summer did this earlier summer with some of the mechanical work. And then just a couple notes about each one of these. We do have pretty extensive mapping across all of our districts of where asbestos is, when it's visible, and areas that you can measure. When you start demolishing parts of your building, then you find areas that are hidden within walls and things like that. And so that's one of the reasons why we have these change orders coming up in this area. So for this one is change order number 4 for $79,515.
Thank you. And thank you for the additional context again. Any questions?
I'll move the change order as presented.
I'll second.
So we have a motion to approve the RHS asbestos abatement change order number 4 by Mr. Tensing and a second by Ms. Smishak. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the change order is approved. Next one.
Thanks. The next one is for change order number 2 at Richfield STEM School for the asbestos abatement there. This one is $17,050. Again, similar where as part of the demolition occurs, we identify additional areas that need this abatement.
Any questions or a motion?
I will move approval of asbestos abatement change order number 2 for Richfield STEM School.
Second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Mr. Tensing. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the change order is approved. We move into new business where we have 4 new items before us this evening for the first time. First is authorization to purchase 4 passenger vehicles for the district.
Thank you. And this is something that we take a look at every year, what our current fleet is, if there are vehicles that are needing replacement. Unfortunately, this year we had a couple issues where we need some vehicles replaced a little bit more earlier. One of these is a replacement for the vehicle that was involved in a bus fire. And another one, there was some damage to one of the vehicles that renders it needing to be replaced as well. So 2 of these would occur within the FY20 year, or our current fiscal year, and then 2 of these would be occurring next spring, or in next fiscal year. It's a 77 passenger school bus, which is the vehicle that was on fire, 2 65 passenger vehicles, and then a 30 passenger vehicle. Just going through a highlight of kind of our transportation program, and when we do this, it's nice to kind of take a look and reflect on what is it that we're doing to maintain our buses, what are some of the safety protocols and features when we're looking at these bus replacements, and just an affirmation that it is not something that we just put into a rotation, that Dan McGinn, who actually joined us here, one of the technical wizards within the bus garage, is here to kind of answer one of those questions, but is maintaining all of those fleets as well. So our first priority within our transportation department is obviously safe and reliable transportation. Knowing that we have buses on the road to pick up kids and get them to school on time, to get them home from school on time, as well as in a very safe environment. And then we've taken a number of measures to really kind of ensure that that's happening. So one of the things that we've started to do with our new bus purchases is make sure that they're equipped with stop arm cameras as well as cameras within each one of those buses. So interior cameras for students and drivers. We've also this year implemented new routing and GPS software for all district vehicles. One of the things that was remarkable, and Dan Kretzinger was sharing with me, is they could take a look at that data, and with that bus fire, they could actually see the different systems that were failing within that bus as it was going on. So it really tracks a lot of what's happening mechanically within those buses, as well as where they're located, the speed the buses are going, how fast they're stopping, and so it really kind of helps us kind of monitor what's happening within those vehicles. Enhancing our safety and emergency preparedness program for our drivers, making sure that they're well trained. As we know, we had a driver who responded exactly how we would want them to respond in that situation, and that is a result of that training. And then increased driver training for student management and driving skills. So ensuring that our drivers aren't just equipped with the technical features of driving, but because they are also managing a classroom of many times 50 plus students, that behavior management is something that our adults on those buses need to be monitoring as well. So those are some of the things that we've been really focused on. This is just a highlight. Dan McGinn and his team really kind of take a look at making sure that we are at least meeting, if not exceeding, our manufacturer's recommendations for services. This just kind of highlights what those service recommendations are from the transportation industry. Our large buses every 6 months with miles or hours that are calculated along with that. Mini buses every 3 months. Our type 3 buses or vehicles, which are kind of the vans with larger passenger capacity, 6 months, and the different maintenance with our other grounds equipment. Much of that is done within the school facilities by our two garage mechanics that are working within the area. Some of the repairs are done externally, but those two are really individually supervising that. Dan is very meticulous at making sure he's got his spreadsheets managed, and things are at a high level of making sure that he knows exactly where things are at. And one of the things that we're proud of is because of those maintenance routines and that observation, as well as our bus drivers paying attention to the quality of the vehicles, that we generally receive very, very, very high scores from the State Patrol when they come on and do their inspections. And so very small issues that have to be resolved, but those are have represented a lot of that success of the team that's working on this. This is just some information about why we start to try to replace vehicles before they actually fail. If we run it to where they're actually failing, then we run the risk of not having vehicles on the road. We also see increased costs as that moves forward. So an engine replacement is about $20,000. So when we're looking at $100,000 vehicles that are being replaced, being able to make sure that we're making those replacements before we're having to invest in that area. And then you can see some of the other costs of some of the more routine pieces with transmission replacements, electrical systems, different body work, and things like that. So the older vehicles get, the more likely they are to have issues that need repair, and then you just try to figure out that cost-benefit analysis of that. So again, more information about why replacing. Obviously, we have updated safety equipment, and so making sure that we're purchasing vehicles that have the most up-to-date safety features, also are reducing some of those maintenance issues. We talked about the stop arm and the interior camera replacement, being able to go into those. Safety compliance, literally the State Patrol comes out and they are inspecting every underside, every overside, every side, every walk around of each one of those vehicles, looking for rips, tears, any potential even inklings of starts of rust. And so making sure that we have those at high quality levels and are able to manage that. Maintenance, we talked about reducing the labor costs associated with that, as well as the other factors. Mitigating financial risk with reducing vehicle values. So as the vehicles get older, obviously the replacement, either trade-in or sale of those vehicles goes down as well. And then just the logistics, as we talked about, of buses being placed out of service, hindering our transportation and district operations. This just shows the 4 vehicles that we are seeking replacement on. The 24 passenger, there's a calculation of miles, which are actually miles served, which sometimes you look at that and say we're replacing vehicles with only 71,000 miles, 105,000 miles on it. In reality, a lot of those vehicles are idling, and so there's a lot of research that shows that that's also increasing that wear and tear on those vehicles. And so we add that calculation in there of if we're translating the hours that each one of those vehicles is, how that calculates out to, in many cases, that 180,000 mile conversion, which really is kind of the age of those vehicles, even though they've only driven X number of miles. And this is just the methodology. So we generally look at a 10 to 12 year rotation, but then we also look at what are the maintenance records of those different vehicles, what are issues that are popping up that are resolving around those areas. And so this just shows that mileage, the hours, and we have 3 of the vehicles that really were set for rotation. One of those vehicles had some damage that causes it to be set for rotation at this point because it was identified as a total loss by our insurance carrier. And then we also have that bus fire incident that happened as well that's a total loss. So it's those lower 2 vehicles that we're looking for purchase this year. And we do have the capital funds in place in our reserves to be able to make those purchases. And this is the estimated equipment cost for each one of those that come from the state bid. The 77 passengers, $110,000. The 265 passengers are $109,000 each. And then the 30 passenger is just under $66,000. So we are requesting authorization for these purchases here. We did start doing actual purchases out of these equipment, actual purchases of these vehicles. Previously we had done leases, but we had built up the capital now where we're able to actually make those purchases, which allows us to circumvent any of that interest costs that are associated with that or the additional factors tied in with it. So really kind of a pay as you go instead of pay over time. So if there are questions about the mechanics, I'm going to turn it over to Dan. Otherwise, we'll be asking for your approval at this point.
How, you mentioned insurance. Did we get anything from insurance to offset
Yes.
this cost?
So with a 77 passenger vehicle, we will, I believe it was, I don't have the exact amount, but it was right around $70,000 or $75,000. That was the replacement of that vehicle. So that offsets that, a
And is
good
that
chunk of
already
that.
included there, or
These are showing the total
the
cost.
total cost
So,
without?
so the capital from that insurance of both that as well as the other vehicle damage. The other vehicle damage wasn't as significant. I think it was closer to 10 to 15,000, because that was one that was already set for rotation at this point.
So I really appreciate how in-depth all of that was. I think it's really helpful for us in making decisions and talking about these types of things. I really appreciate how well documented all the maintenance is. I think when we had the incident with the fire, being able to look back at that and see that that had been on its regular maintenance schedule and checked and it was not neglected was a really important feature for all of us, information to have. I have heard a little bit about like fire suppression systems since that happened. I haven't myself investigated it, but I'm wondering if we've looked into anything like that going forward. That's not necessarily related to purchasing these, but and I don't know if you purchase them with that system in it or if it's something you buy separately.
We've had a number of calls, surprise, soliciting that. It has not currently been decided to install those at this point. It is something that we can do post-market without any issue. So though we're still contemplating that piece.
Okay.
It's kind of that cost-benefit analysis of you have one situation. When we're prepared like this, it works out fairly well. But at the same time, this could have turned out very differently if people did not respond the way it did. So we are taking a deeper dive look at initiating that, seeing who's used it, who's implemented it, kind of what that extent is at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to clarify one piece. So we did have an insurance settlement. A good chunk of that will actually be going to pay off the lease because that vehicle was still under a lease program. So we did have a series of years. So there was some residual funds left on it, but it wasn't that entire settlement amount for that.
I'll also add, I love that we're buying them outright and not paying interest to lease them. That's good news to hear.
Yep.
So does that mean we have to pay the balance we have to pay the balance of the lease
Yes.
for the bus that was destroyed, even though we didn't own it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's done under a lease purchase agreement, and so the insurance company carried that piece of it. So we were required to carry the insurance for that vehicle. They reconciled with the leasing company first, and then any of the residual that was left on that came back to the district.
And I just wanted to say thank you, Dan, for being here as well and for the work that you do to keep our students and our buses safe. It's very appreciated.
And I have it's not really a question, but on behalf of our viewers and climate oriented individuals, if you could explain a little bit more why we do have to idle the idling of the buses.
I'm gonna let Dan come up. And so the question is, why are the vehicles running? So most of these are diesel vehicles, right?
Yes.
And so with diesel vehicles, you're spending more time and energy and money by starting them up and turning them off versus having them kind of run for that period of time when they're in transition between vehicles. Or between routes?
Right. And with the state policy, as far as I understand it, there's no idling at schools. We do make some on-the-spot changes with that. When we have a mechanical issue where we can run the bus, but keep it running. Don't shut it off for any reason. Those are our only times. There's warm-up time over here at the garage. A lot of people have complained about that. And we're trying to warm up oil so we can service them and see if we have leaks in cooling systems and stuff. So it's a normal part of it.
And I think some of the hours, and speaking outside of my expertise, but I believe some of the hours are simply you pull up to a bus stop. You stop, you let kids get on the bus. Then you go to the next bus stop. So it's kind of those stops and starts that are associated with it, where it's not true miles, which is kind of an average of highway miles. The vehicles are spending a lot of time stopping and starting at different locations. And so that's also part of those total hours. So it's not, 75,000 hours of waiting time, or 7,000 hours of waiting time. It's different bus stops and things like that too. Does that answer your question?
No, I'm aware of that. I
Okay.
just, when you say idling and how many more miles, it looks scary by looking at the table unless you understand, like, anyone watching without context would, but why are the buses doing that? So there is a reason. And I think anyone with remote status knows that their mileage per gallon goes down when you are warming up your vehicle in the morning. So I'm guilty of that once.
Thank you very much. Do we have a motion to approve the authorization to purchase these vehicles?
I would move authorization for purchase of the 4 passenger vehicles.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Cole. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the authorization is granted. Next is approval of the 2020-2021 district calendar and a review of the proposed 2021-2022 calendar.
Correct. So we've gotten into a good routine of taking a look at doing an initial draft of the calendar for 2 years out and then doing a final approval for what was recommended by the committee moving the previous year, just so that we can start some forward thinking, especially when we're looking at kind of those longer winter break, spring break, start of school year, end of school year. So this year we had two calendar committee meetings where we had 27 individuals kind of represent and participate in the recommendations. We did take a look at each one of the features associated with the 2021 school calendar, had some discussions, and we'll kind of step through a couple of those discussions here, most specifically around the winter break, the start and the end times of the school year, and then also similarly take a look at the 21-22 calendar year. In essence, what ended up happening for the most part is the committee recommended unanimously approving that draft calendar from 2021 with a couple minor modifications. And probably what would be best is for us to move on to the calendar. And even though it doesn't show up, you can kind of see the red blocks where there's no school, the other blocks where there is school. And so what the recommendation here is that we start school on the day after Labor Day, which is Tuesday, September 8th. Kindergarten students will be doing assessments those days, one-to-one with parents. So they won't necessarily start, or what's recommended by the committee is that the kindergarten students start in their classroom on Wednesday as an entire class. But the Tuesday will be spent kind of in mini conferences between the kindergarten teacher and the parents, and also an opportunity for the kindergarten teachers to do some initial assessments of those kindergarten students. It's something that came forward as one of the teacher recommendations, where there are some districts that do this, some districts that don't. Given our construction this year, it seemed like a good time just to make sure that transition was smooth for those kindergarten students. We also find that sometimes it makes it easier for the routes to run for buses because you have the kindergarten students that are starting on the second day riding their buses and things like that. We know that will require a lot of communication out to parents because it is a change in kind of what's been traditional. But with kindergarten parents, we think that we have some of that extensive outreach that's already occurring too. So that's one of the biggest changes as far as this recommendation. We also have kind of conferences and MEA break that occur in the middle of October, which is very traditional to what we've been doing with the calendar. We actually next year have 2 professional development days that are occurring the first week of November. Generally, we have one day here and then one day in the spring because of the elections coming up in November. And even though most of our buildings won't be hosting elections this year, we do have 2 buildings, Central and the Dual Language School, that are hosting elections this year. It really kind of mitigates a lot of that risk of additional individuals in the schools and helping to kind of mitigate that disruption that elections, especially large elections, can have in those school settings. So it moves 2 days off of professional development to November 2 and 3. They're the 3 days off over the Thanksgiving holiday. Winter break is 8 days of winter break this year. It's not 2 full weeks. We did have some conversations about 2 full weeks reviewed back. Biggest reasons is if we do 2 full weeks, we need to do 2 additional days of school. Doing 2 additional days of school, the only place that it really we're allowed to do it is if we cut spring break short, find other days that are currently not school days, or extend the end of the school year to Friday, June 11th, which by the end of that second week of June, the general consensus is that gets a little bit too late into the summer and spring is extended.
I think our student facial reactions really back up what you're saying right now.
So even though many people really like the 2-week winter break, there was just a lot of logistics that made it difficult to happen. And then also shortening that second summer, knowing that we still have construction projects going on that second summer, it shortened that following summer as well. So there's a lot of different factors that next year really put that at risk or create that as a challenge. And then the other thing that we talked about is just kind of making sure that we know that a lot of our families rely on schools for nutrition. And kind of that continuity, and the more you extend that winter break, the more challenging it is to get kids back focused after the school. One of the teachers brought a fact that you have as much time, it takes as much time to reteach the work after an extended break as you spent on break. So if you had 2 weeks off, it takes, especially for elementary kids, a full week or two before you're back in a good place where you can start doing assessments and things like that, or moving some of those other pieces. So just that transition creates some challenges. What we know historically is that 50% of our people like the 2-week winter break, and 50% of our community don't like the 2-week winter break. And so we really identified that there are times that it works and times that it doesn't, and we're not going to be set on one way or another, and we're going to look at kind of where those fall on an individual year basis. So we did have extensive conversation about that again this year, and really super strong consensus that came out of staying with the 8 days that were originally proposed from last year. There's Martin Luther King Day on the 18th, and then the end of semester and another professional development day is January 28th and 29th. Conferences for K-8 occurring in the middle of February with an extended winter President's Day break with Friday and Monday off in that situation. Spring break next year would be March 29th through April 2nd. Generally what we strive for is either the last week of March or the first week of April, and not setting strongly on one or the other, because we just have different communities and some people like one or the other. And then the last day, Memorial Day would be the 31st, and the last day of school is June 9th with graduation at that point. There are some testing dates and other things that are still on here with high school conferences that can adjust after the board approves the calendar. What the board is really approving is those starting and end dates, the breaks in the calendar, and then if there's any specific concerns with any of those other recommendations, we can take those back as well. So that's the 2021 calendar. Just to move quickly to the 21-22, what's recommended here is very similar to what we just talked about. Both this year and next year, we have late Labor Days, which helps us with the summer construction schedule, but is also not an ideal situation given what those summers are, and moving into June. But again, starting September 7th, we did move the professional development day back to the spring just because it's helpful to have those spread out in 3 different times. Breaks up that spring season a little bit more, and then has the last day, actually puts spring break as the first week of April, because we've been the last week of March, and so it moves that into the first week of April that time, and then puts the last day of school as June 8th. So those are the primary changes with that 21-22 draft calendar. That's just for feedback at this point. We're not asking for approval for that, but if the board has concerns, we'd like to have that so we can start to review that more specifically.
Okay.
So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Maybe we should take questions on the 2020-21 first,
Yep.
and then we can turn to questions on the 21-22. Any questions on the one that we are actually voting on this evening? I have a question. And it is about the last day of school. And actually, I should first say thank you for all the context around the 2-week winter break, because I know it is a really challenging issue every year. And like we all talked about how nice it felt to have a full 2-week winter break this year. So it's going to be hard to not have that next year. But I think you laid out really helpfully the reasons why the committee landed where it did. The question for the last day is actually specific for the high school, And so it could be a question for Steve, which is around the practice of what the last day is for seniors versus the last day for the rest of the school. And just whether or not there's a way to indicate that in the official calendar. So I will let you take
So
that.
the last instructional day for seniors is the 4th of June in 2021, with 3 days of makeup and supports to students to help ensure everybody gets that opportunity to graduate or anybody needing to make things up. And so there are still official days of school, but it is designed for students who are in need of anything to help them graduate. We can certainly note that on the calendar as that gets published.
So is graduation like the same, like the last day of school next year too?
Technically, yes.
I think that's where it
Yes.
gets tricky,
Right.
right? Because it's how can we both reflect the fact that the 7th, 8th, and 9th are available for seniors who want and need that, but also give families a heads up that, hey, your senior might not need it, in which case the 4th could technically, or maybe not technically, but spiritually be their last day of school. I think that's the line that I think is a little bit tricky.
We will figure out the communication on that.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
It's crazy the school year.
Any other questions?
How many kids need those 3 days?
You'd be surprised.
On percentage wise, not
Percentage, usually about 10%.
10%. Okay.
10% to complete. However, we also had a wide range of community building activities. There was a senior picnic that was co-hosted at Augsburg Park. There were multiple different senior activities that have been hosted. We can, when high school presents, which is actually at our next meeting, we can have them share some of the information about what is available and what opportunities they have for seniors on those last days. There are about 10% that need it for the work. There are another set of students who work to raise their grades during that time also. And so there is more, 30 to 50% of the students are engaged in classes, and then a wide range of kids are in the extra opportunities that were offered. But I'll have Dr. Daniels share some of that at our next meeting. And we will clarify that communication for this coming June, and then also figure out how to put that into our calendar for the future.
I think if we set it up as the last day, it's going to interfere with a lot of that work, like that you just mentioned, or parents seeing like, oh, this is the last day, and maybe parents making plans, or so I think maybe more internal communication in that regard, and not necessarily putting the empty square in the calendar, because I'll be planning vacation like my
Right.
kids
No,
don't.
an empty square would mean it was not a school day. These are actually still school days.
Right.
It would actually impact our school budget and our overall enrollment if we were to make those non-school days. These are just some flexible events, and we will figure out an appropriate way. And like I said, at our next board meeting, we'll make sure that we're communicating that out and talking about the communication plan related to high school.
And seniors specifically.
And seniors
It's not the
specific,
whole
yes,
thing.
no,
Yeah.
only seniors, correct. Every other student is
Yeah.
in traditional school through the 9th.
Any other questions about this coming school year? Okay, let's move on to questions, and this is just the proposal. We will not be voting on this one tonight, but 2021, 2022. I struggled to get those words out.
Certainly the 2021 election will be much smaller than the 2020 election. I would just voice still some concerns if we're gonna have any voting in any of the school buildings for safety.
So those are conversations that we have, and there are two very differing perspectives on that. One is the safety and security concern. The other is the ability to welcome our community into our schools. And so there is a tension with that. And so we're seeing how this year goes because we only have a couple of school sites that are actually available for voting this year. And so we're seeing and working collaboratively with the city to determine what will be our role in elections for the future and examining that further.
And I would just say, as part of our facilities project, a number of our sites have taken a look at, if they do continue elections, where's a good location for them to be hosting those elections so it's less disruptive. So that's been a part of our facility project as well.
The central site, does that have the same concerns from a security perspective?
I mean, we have early childhood programming at that site. It tends to be in and down a straight hall, and so that is less disruptive around the classrooms. There's less movement on that main hall during that time period, so it's a little bit easier to supervise. But they definitely are aware of it and have heightened supervision during that time period and concerns too. So.
And similarly, we'll be hosting at RDLS, and we will have clearly marcated areas between the school and between people coming in to vote. But that is the only time where the entire community is welcome into schools. And so there is that complexity, even when you do separate the voting from our students.
The one concern I have about the 2021 draft, and would just love for the committee to talk about this as you all come back to this, is that the first day or 2 days of school are Rosh Hashanah. And so it is, I think, potentially concerning that students and families could be in a position of feeling like they have to choose between observing a religious holiday or going to the first day of school. And I think the first day of school is what makes that particularly challenging. That would be a really tough decision and tough trade-off to make. And I also know it's hard to find the first day of school, but that is a really significant religious holiday. And so it just makes me a little bit uneasy that in this current version, we could be putting our Jewish families in that position. So just wanted to raise that, and I know you'll come back to us next year with more.
Okay, I would be willing to move approval of the district calendar for school year 2020-2021.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Smishak. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the 2020-2021 calendar is approved.
Thank you.
Next is a first review of existing board policy 502 on resident and non-resident student enrollment, and quite a few guidelines that go with it.
Yes, we'll say, and too many guidelines to go with it. And so as a reminder of our first read, and you're going to notice already, we provide the policy and then we provide the model policy from MSBA. So the model policy 509 does not have, we'll say, 20 pages to go along with it. Policy 502 is around open enrollment, and we last looked at this in 2013. However, it was updated by the state in 2017, and there are conversations occurring in regard to open enrollment and how that is implemented. So the purpose of the policy overall is to lay that framework for the enrollment, not just of resident students, but non-resident students, and the process of open enrollment. And so it talks about how do we go through admitting resident students, what do we do in relation to non-resident students, things around exclusion or why would a student not be allowed to enroll, things related to termination of enrollment and or also transfers within our district. It also talks about enrollment in all-day kindergarten and then also additional programs. Then we go on with multiple guidelines. You see an example of the high school of what the expectations were at the time. Some of those have changed, and so this is something that will obviously be redone or eliminated depending on if we determine that we want to see that specific example of what is asked for at each school. You'll see the form then in guideline 5022 if there is a parent who is no longer in charge or responsible for their child. This would allow somebody who is not a direct parent to enroll their child in our schools. Then you have a copy in 5023 of the Minnesota Department of Education Enrollment Options Form, which is the open enrollment form, which is required by students open enrolling to our district. And then guideline 502.4, which is interdistrict transfers, or students coming into our district or coming out of our district at times often other than those defined by open enrollment. And with changes in the achievement and integration rules, we are actually an open district, functionally at all times, unless students are eliminated based on termination of enrollment-based criteria, or if there have been reasons in the past why they have not been allowed to enroll in Richfield Public Schools. So when we come back with a revised copy, this will be much simplified.
And to what you were just saying, does that mean that the inter-district transfer part of this specifically is largely irrelevant now?
There are multiple components of this that are irrelevant or not necessary within our current guidelines and within what we need in the future. Yes.
Well, that's why we're looking at it. Great.
Absolutely. And so just as a reminder, because a couple of questions have come up in regard to open enrollment, at present we follow directly the achievement and integration guidelines of the state of Minnesota as a district that takes the aid and the incentive aid, which means we allow for open enrollment. We do not have caps. If we were to take caps or stop certain open enrollment, that would take a board action to close a specific grade or close a specific school. We have not asked that. Our practice in the past has been to add teachers if needed to support the addition of students through open enrollment. And so the only reason also legally within the regulations of open enrollment for declining open enrollment are either a student involved in an expulsion procedure in certain cases, and then also due to attendance or ongoing attendance issues that are thought to be improved by the student going to school closer to home. And so our guidelines will be updated to accommodate each of those expectations of the state.
Steve, I heard from some residents a concern about a exodus from neighboring district or our district. And the concern was that the parent wanted to make sure that we would not be in a position of refusing Richfield students to accommodate for space for students from other districts. Now, understanding that our enrollment hasn't been, I don't see that as a concern, but if you could make people feel ease
Sure.
some concerns, because
So first off, we would not be in a position to turn down resident students. I will say ever, but to the best of my experience now and in the future. Our dual immersion program happens to be quite popular and has seen some additional influxes of open enrollment requests. We have worked together with facilities and also the principal, and we are confident we could, and it is a 3-section and a 2-section school at present, so there are 17 sections. We could, if needed, enlarge that to a 4-section school or go all the way up to 24 sections, which means we could add approximately 175 more students before we would talk about facility needs. So there's a significant amount of space within, that would be an example of our smallest building at this time, where we could add, again, 175 new students to a K-5 building without yet coming under concern. So we have a lot of space and a lot of time as a board and leadership before we need to worry about capping open enrollment or ever worrying about resident enrollment.
Yeah, and I think, as to your point, is there even any legal way to limit resident enrollment? I mean, I think that we're compelled to enroll resident students.
We have options within schools.
Right.
So
So this is a little different from choice, which was another question that I was going to ask. Yeah.
So we cannot turn away resident enrollment. That is correct. Choice, however, is a conversation we are able to have at the board. We have followed a philosophy of allowing students within the school of their choice and doing the best we can to accommodate class sizes and, if needed, to add teachers. That can get complex at times because sometimes class sizes will be at that higher edge of our class size goals. And so we often have pretty transparent conversations with parents by saying, we aren't able to add a teacher with 1 or 2 more students, but you would be walking into a classroom that is higher than the classroom at the same grade level in our other 3 schools in the district. And so people do have those conversations, but we have not taken steps to restrict choice at this time. And that would be new board guidance if the board wanted to have that conversation and guide administration to review that differently.
Question on the board cap, which we don't have, which we've never even discussed. Just hypothetically asking the question, and was I reading between the lines correctly when you said that passage of a cap there may be a consequence of some state aid that we would no longer be eligible for?
No, if there is a reason to cap, we can take that action as a board. The board would need to take that action, but as a district that takes funding for open enrollment, we are required to leave our classrooms open short of a board
Got it.
cap.
Got it. So then I guess the second question is, the language on if there is a reason to cap is there is no constraint around what those reasons could be. Are there any statutory restraints on a board passing a cap? Is that something we need? Again, this is just a curiosity question.
Because I have never investigated that, I'd need to gather information specifically to be able to answer that and be sure of my answer. So I can have that when we read it for a second time about legal requirements related to achievement and integration, and when a board can and cannot cap a class size or a grade or a school. So we'll have that information about legal requirements, achievement and integration, and when a board can cap a class or a school or a grade.
The one other piece that I noticed was there is an MSBA model, the MSBA model policy. I've got in my notes section B, which kind of goes into some detail on the exclusion. I believe that's language that just simply is not in our policy at all.
I believe our language is around expulsion. So if you look, these are the clearly expellable based offenses, standards that may be used for rejection. And what he's talking about is in the model policy, he talks about weapons, drugs, sale of controlled substances, or significant assaults. The things that can't, academic achievement, extracurricular activities, disabled conditions, IEPs 504, students' proficiency in ELL, their district of residence, or any form of discipline that they have had in the past. So, and if you look back on our policy.
Yeah, I think we just sort of reference an excludable or expellable incident, and then we reference the Pupil Fair Dismissal Act.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And so those are things that typically come up. And the other component, termination of enrollment, related to habitual truant, and has then been also referred to the courts in regard to truancy. And so that is reasons for termination of open enrollment.
Reasons for, but not required. That
it is not
essentially then left to the discretion of the district.
Correct. It is not required that we would say no. It provides those as options in regard to that.
This is one that's obviously going to take a lot of work to bring up to date, and I imagine that we will have some good conversation about the different decisions that are ahead. I think the issue that Paula brought up is certainly on people's minds, as one of our largest neighboring districts is undergoing some pretty significant change, and I think people are wondering what is the effect that could have on our schools and our community. And so this is a very timely policy for us to be looking at. Any final questions or comments?
I look forward to the simplified version.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as we've stated, although we haven't, it's not in black and white. We have a general value around sort of doing everything we can to honor and this really only matters in our district at the K-5 level, of doing everything we can to honor the choice of the family to enroll their student at the K-5 school that they believe is best for them, knowing that sometimes that choice comes along with larger class sizes, depending upon sort of how people are distributing themselves among some of our different programs. So I don't know if that's something that I feel like that's where the anxiety that Paula was mentioning, that's kind of where the anxiety bubbles up around that.
Well, I think it's important that over the next month or so, people reflect on where they are in terms of open enrollment and changes that may happen within schools. There are districts that have as high open enrollment as 3,000 additional students. And there are districts that are more neutral within the 100 students up, 100 students down. And so for us, we'll need to have that conversation around are there things that we believe philosophically about open enrollment that would make us go away from any of the typically implemented rules? And those might have positive or negative consequences. So it's important for board members to reflect on where they stand in regard to open enrollment and our regulations.
It could potentially be helpful, and I'm happy to do some of this on my own and share what I find, but to look at a range of policies that other districts have to see, if most people actually just have kind of the MSBA model policy that they've taken and adapted, or if there are some districts that are choosing to actually do some things at the policy level that are significantly different from that. I think that's something that I feel like would be helpful for me at least to have a sense of as we start this. Anything else? Okay, we will move on to our last item of new business, which is donations made to the district since our last meeting.
All right, so the Richfield High School Random Acts of Kindness received a donation from Kristen Shack for $5 to the Target Employee Giving Campaign. And Natasha Tiu from RDLS donated a Canon DSLR camera valued at $150, as well as film for the camera valued at $50 to Richfield High School. This camera equipment will be used by high school students in their photo class. And Richfield Rotary donated $3,277.23 for media resources. We thank our generous funders for supporting our students and programs.
I move to accept these donations with gratitude.
I will second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Cole and a second by Mr. Tensing. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the donations are accepted with gratitude. So we move into advanced planning, and as always, we'll begin with the legislative update. Looking to our legislative liaison and our superintendent.
So I will share with you a briefing from the AMSD Legislative Preview, which was interesting this year. It was actually one of the for something that can sometimes feel kind of dry. It wasn't dry. There was actually a relatively significant bit of tension in the room. The way that particular event gets laid out is superintendent of AMSD will present the AMSD platform to the legislators that are guests in attendance. And this year, I think that the three superintendents who were chosen to do that presentation did a great job. And they did not shy away from taking, I think, very strong stances on some areas that were causing significant stress to their districts. Whether those issues are just around sustainability of funding, whether those issues are around the achievement gap and racially predictable outcomes for our kids, or whether those issues were around supporting student mental health and sort of the significant challenges with student mental health in some of our schools. And some of the stories that were told were actually kind of difficult to hear, districts that are struggling with students that are in crisis, especially around the mental health side. One of the sort of tension points is Aston Osai, who is the superintendent from St. Louis Park, our peer from St. Louis Park, I think made the very intentional observation that the achievement gap is really an opportunity gap. And that language actually is pretty meaningful in terms of sort of how you think about why that gap exists and all of the diverse factors that can drive the existence of that gap. Embracing that language, embracing the opportunity gap language was not easy for our legislators. That was not something that they were necessarily all willing to do. And so there was some tension that was starting to just build at that point as everyone is paying. Everyone agrees that this gap is important to close, and no one seems to think it's necessarily their job to close it if they are not a teacher. It's only teachers who can do this, apparently. And so the pushback, I see Luce is saying, how does that work? Which is a great question. And so I think that was really some of the pushback that our legislators were feeling from this room of educators who were saying, look, we've been at this now for a long time. We may not be making progress, and we all need to sort of come to the table and sort of step up. So that was an interesting tension that I think we were feeling in that room between the educators and the legislators, whose job, at least as I would see it, is to provide the educators with the tools and resources that they need to actually do their work. The other challenge the other issue that came up, which I think is an interesting one that is going to be putting some tension into the whole dialogue, is around the constitutional amendment and exactly how any one of us necessarily processes why, what are the motivations from Justice Page and Fed President Kashkari for bringing this forward. I think, what is abundantly clear again is that the legislature has not, as a state, we haven't necessarily succeeded in meeting our goal of closing this gap. And so at least I personally interpret the motivation to be around building in some sort of mechanism, some sort of accountability or incentive mechanism. And the legislature has a hard time holding itself accountable. So anyway, that's kind of how I saw it play. It's really hard to know then at a detail level what that actually is going to mean in terms of how policies, this being a policy year, how that plays forward. So that was sort of my observation. Chair Brackey was there as well, if you want to share anything. I will say this, to get into a sort of very nuts and bolts area, which just sort of comes from our own legislative priorities, is I still personally hold out some hope that we could see potentially some action on the high school MCA. And so even though that in the context of talking about these more weighty issues of race and equity and the mental health challenges, we didn't necessarily feel that talking about the high school MCA kind of felt right for the tone of the room at that moment. But nevertheless, it seems like there may be some coalitions actually of people that we could get together if we want to make some progress on the high school MCA. So, Crystal or
yeah.
Steve
So
or
I did
Leader?
attend. Superintendent Unoski and Assistant Superintendent Roby were there as well. And I would just say this was my first time attending this event, and it was far more challenging for me than I thought it was going to be because of, I think, the lack of alignment that Peter was talking about that felt very visceral in the room. The lack of alignment between the legislators and what the superintendents had talked about in terms of what felt like priorities for schools. The lack of alignment that I personally was feeling with some of the other board members in the room and comments that were made that made me think, wow, we hold some really different beliefs in this room. And potentially have some really different values, and yet we are all charged with this responsibility of being on a school board. And so it was a experience for me that was really kind of confusing because I was not expecting that level of challenge and tension, but at the same time, I actually appreciate that at least it was out there because I feel like better that than it being kind of under the surface and just continuing to perpetuate and the status quo just going on as it does. So I'm interested to see what happens from here. I think AMSD, the Association of Metropolitan School Districts, has a really challenging charge of actually trying to find alignment across a group of districts and legislators that are different and that want different things and think we should be prioritizing different things. So it was eye-opening. It was a struggle. There were some really tense moments, and there were some people that I really appreciated sort of stepping up in the moment and addressing, I think, some of those tensions in the room in a way that was powerful and really necessary. So if there's anything you want to add to that, feel free.
No, I mean, I think the different ways of looking at similar issues was on display.
Yeah.
I think in my heart, I believe that everybody looks towards the same outcome, that they want all kids to have all the opportunities that they could possibly imagine. And then there are very different ways of looking at why these situations exist and the methods for getting there, and almost polar opposite types of perspectives on why we're in the situations we are and how to get there. And so I take heart in the fact that I believe everybody wants amazing things for all kids. And then also there is that conflict around really almost clashing methodologies and belief systems about the ways to get to success for our kids.
Yep. So, I mean, to me, the take-home point, thinking about what we do here in Richfield is, number one, I think we can be grateful for the community that we live in, which has proven itself to be extremely supportive of the endeavor of educating our kids, and of supporting good outcomes for all kids. And I think that we should not feel shy about doing the work, and doing the work ourselves, knowing that there is not likely to be a external force that's going to come in and do the work for us. So,
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would like to add legislatively?
No,
Okay.
not at this
time. Let's move into information and or questions from the board for each other. A little birdie in the audience let me know that today was the 100th day of school for Richfield High School students. So special celebration for our high school students and staff for making it to that 100-day mark. You probably didn't even know, but it was today. So happy 100th day.
And at the same time, this is School Board Appreciation Week. And so I want to say on behalf of our community and our students and our families and our staff, thank you to each of you for your service to our community and to your service to our students. It is noticed and it is appreciated. So thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. So our next meeting will be at 7 p.m. on Monday, March 2nd, and we will have Richfield High School here for a second meeting in a row. This will be a presentation from our admin team, I believe. Is that accurate?
High school, yes.
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 High school
admin team
sorry.
is coming. Yes.
And then as I shared earlier, the second meeting of March will be on March 16th and begin with time for public comment. So lastly, are there any additional items that board members would like to request for discussion at an upcoming meeting? I have one, which is if we could have a board conversation or presentation about the initial round of inputs that we've been getting from our strategic planning meetings and online feedback. I think it would just be a helpful checkpoint for us to have at this point in the process.
So
before we go
strategic
further.
plan summary updates, yes, and process-wise, we'll be moving from input to synthesis as we move to the next month. So that is a great time to add that feedback.
Okay. Before we adjourn, thanks to everybody who is still here with us at the end of the meeting. Our final item of business is to adjourn. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Tutzing and a second by Ms. Cole. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the meeting is adjourned at 8:55 p.m.